Welcome to Shalom World Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Real Men series. My name's Jonathan Doyle. Great to have the pleasure of your company once again. We've got another fantastic topic for you today. Today, we're going to be talking about the issue of relationships, friendships. It's a crucial topic in how men relate to each other. All of us at different times in life have felt loneliness, have maybe felt disconnected. So what does it mean for a Christian man to have strong friendships, to relate to the other men in his life in ways that really enhance his other relationships, such as marriage or even raising his own children? So I'm joined in the studio again today by my good friend, Robert Falzon. Robert has a wealth of experience in men's issues, and I know you're really going to enjoy his insights today. Robert, welcome back to another episode.
Hey Jonathan, it's good to be here with you. What a great time this is and this series together. It's been a lot of fun so far, and we are going to explore this topic, Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers, what does it mean to have real men in your life, real Christian men walking with us and sharing our journey and helping us on the way and leading us to Christ?
So you've been involved in men's ministry for many, many years. What have you observed? Just give us a little insight on what you've observed in terms of men and friendships.
Yes, so from the time that we started Men Alive, what I ran into firstly was something in here. You know, like I felt like I was on a journey by myself. Yeah. And if I let anybody in here, if I let anybody into this private place, they'd use that against me. Mm-hmm. I felt that if anybody saw who I really was, I would be disqualified from the game. But as I started Men Alive and walked with some brothers, and one of them's going to join us today, I started to discover that it made me stronger. So what about you?
Well, a little similar to yourself, a real interest in men's work in general. Of course, I came from a perfect childhood, perfect family with absolutely no issues whatsoever.
I can see that.
Yeah, no, so like a lot of men watching this series, my journey was, it definitely had more than its share of challenges and difficulties. Yeah. And, you definitely, I think, as a younger man, it's relatively easy, I think, to form friendships during your school years. You're surrounded by a large number of peers, but I think for a lot of guys, once you move out of that season of life, there's more complexity, there's more busyness. I think it's probably fair to say that for a lot of men, investing in friendships can become quite difficult. So before you blink, a lot of years have passed, and I think you can find yourself, as many men probably have, quite alone. So I think the topic we're discussing is a crucial one. I think you make a great point that it's very difficult for men often just to be vulnerable, to open up. It's a particular cultural moment, I think, where vulnerability has been powerfully linked to weakness. Yeah. So I think with this topic of brotherhood, of male friendships, we're really touching on something that hasn't been discussed a lot. Now tell us, like through the work you've done, have you got memories of particular conversations, men that you've worked with, where you've seen that loneliness play out?
One of the things that we do in our work when we do parish weekends is that we get men to tell their story. And when men start to tell their story in the context of the gospel message, it actually really cuts through to the deeper part of a man's life. And then men start to share, and many men over 15 years now, even with their feedback, say, I told a stranger more about myself in this 2 days than I've done in 47 years or 52 years. It's really, really powerful when a man comes to the threshold of his humanity and is able to step across that line and show themselves to themselves and to the world. Like you said before about young men. You know, when I was at school, I had lots of mates, but they were always around task, like football club. The common ground was things that we did together. Yeah. But then as you get older, as you know, and then get married and have children, life becomes crazy and busy. There's no time for friendships. Do you find that?
I think it's completely true. The complexity and busyness of modern life is we talk about it, but there's a great line, that fish discover water last. We used to use that in seminars. Is that fish? Fish they're so surrounded by water that fish never stop and go, what is this element that's surrounding me? It's just so ubiquitous, it's everywhere. I think the complexity and busyness that surround the lives of most of us as men, particularly in this season, I mean, if you take that age from maybe late teens into, it'll be different for some men, but really that pressure doesn't tend to come off till maybe post 50s for a lot of guys. That's true. So many men are surrounded by these multiple competing demands. Not many people wake up, and not many people watching this series wake up in the morning and go, you know what, I really need to prioritise more effective, Christ-centred male friendships. So, in business we often talk about you have to educate the market, right? You have to actually convince people that there is a need for something.
The value proposition.
It's a value proposition. I think in this episode we want to talk about really communicating to everybody watching, what's the upside here? Like, this shouldn't be something to avoid, or what's this going to cost me? But if I can push through this, if I can invest in deeper male friendships, how am I going to grow spiritually? How am I going to grow personally? People, I think, look at the Christian life for men and think, well, it's all about, Jesus holding baby lambs. The demands of the Christian life for men to really grow personally and then to build great relationships is a difficult path. It has its huge rewards, but I think that should be attractive to men too.
Jonathan, we're very fortunate today to have a special guest to speak into this topic, that we will be able to talk about Band of Brothers from a personal perspective.
100% looking forward to it.
Peter Shakhovskoy is joining us today. Peter's a long-term friend of mine. He's one of my Band of Brothers. Okay. He is 42 years married to Marion. He has 5 adult children and 10 grandchildren, I think. That's not a bad job. Peter has been in the telecommunication industry, and he left the telecommunication industry, retired, and co-founded Men Alive with me. Let's get Peter up here and we'll talk to him about the Band of Brothers.
Bring him on. Peter Shakhovskoy, welcome to the Real Men series. Great to have you with us.
Great to be with you guys.
5 children, 10 grandchildren, heaps of free time, nothing much to keep you busy. Look, tell us a little bit about your backstory. You've been married 42 years, 5 kids, 10 grandkids. You've had a professional career. What are some of the things that have sustained you over the years?
One of them is the gift of family. So I went and had my own, and I come from one of 6. My parents were migrants. They arrived off the boat in 1950. A German mother and a Russian father. And we were kind of the new Australians. And so we learnt to make our way in the neighbourhood. But for me, family was really central and powerful. And so having 5 brothers and sisters meant that having 5 sons was a no-brainer.
Yeah, easy
and then
to do.
10 grandchildren have just been an extraordinary blessing, keeps us alive.
And some of the key values that you learned growing up, if you look back at that time in your life, what are some of the key things that formed who you became as a man?
Great question. Trust, loyalty, faithfulness. I picked up the word in the intro of goodness. My family were deeply committed Catholics and Russian Orthodox, and my father's Russian Orthodox. But in both my mum and my dad, there was this sense of the best thing you can do with your life is to love God and love people. It was all there.
I want to ask you something. We're going to talk about a different topic in this episode. We're going to talk more about friendships and being a band of brothers. But I'm just interested, with a father who is a man of faith, what did you take from watching that? Like, so many men, many of us as part of this series or watching this series didn't get that. When you look back at him, what did you take from him? What did you learn from him growing up?
Good question.
That's a deep question, a good question. I learned both good and bad, I think.
Yeah.
So good in the sense of men of faith have a resource that they can draw on. God is the sustainer. My dad was ripped out of the family home at 17 by the German army and forcefully inducted into the army. Wow. And disappeared, never saw his family again. And went through 4 years on the Russian front and survived a story that he never even talked about, but I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
So I saw there was a man who still loved life, still was full of joy, still had energy and had these 6 kids and built a life from scratch out of this deep connection with God. So that's the good.
Yeah.
The not so good was that he was incredibly private. Yeah. So not only did he not just talk about the war, but he didn't talk about, I can't remember any deep personal conversations. He was the youngest child of 6, and so he was present, but he wasn't. Sure. He was the distant dad, the loving, good, distant dad, but he wasn't connected.
Wow.
And I grew up thinking, there's something wrong with this. And I determined very early that when it came time to be a dad, I would be a different dad.
Yeah. There's about 15 topics in what you're saying that I'd love to dig into. Listening to you, it resonates with my own relationship with my own son at the moment, who's still very young. Before we talk about this Band of Brothers concept, you worked for many years in telecommunications. I just want to ask you quickly, because I think it's useful to all the people watching, is, that season of life when you had children, you had professional demands, what do you remember of that time, and what can you offer us and people watching? Because I'm, in the thick of that myself now, and it's not talked about much how demanding that season is. Yeah. When you look back at your professional life, your married life in that season, what do you remember, and what do you think are a couple of things that people could benefit from hearing?
I remember the incredible sense of pressure and responsibility. Yeah. 5 kids, busy job, busy after hours. Breadwinner, sole breadwinner. My parents told us, get a job, get a house, get a family, save money. Life is tough, survive. So I brought all that into it as well. I remember the stress of being alone. And then as my Christian journey matured, I remembered the great encouragement of having other guys to talk to. Yeah. And that made an enormous difference. Work was always professional, performance, and be tough, be the best, get it done. And there was no time for intimate conversation or vulnerable conversation at work at all. In fact, it was embargoed.
Yeah. So let's open this up. This is what we want to talk about is you're delineating this sort of huge challenge that many men have, the busyness, the pressure. They're like the duck on the water, relatively normal to look at, but spinning underwater very fast. The role of Christian friendship for men, what do you think are the key blockages at the moment? And what do you think are some first steps that men can begin to take?
We've named the first one, it's busyness. So the pace of life, that's the now. And for all of us, there's a challenge in changing the now so that we can have more life and more relationships. But I think the other big topic is history. I remember as a little fellow growing up in the playground, learning the early lessons of manhood. If you're not good at something, you're off the team. If you aren't tough, if you cry or display weakness, you're off the team. If you add to that a dad who doesn't affirm a young man and draw out of him his gifts and his talents and his strengths, his gold coins, then you end up, I think, where I was in the early years, especially the early professional years, thinking, I'm absolutely on my own, I'm toughing this out, and I wish I had someone to talk to. And of course, then you, as a young dad, you have a wife who wants to talk all the time. And my wife would complain about this very self-contained guy. And she would say, you're like a guy in a big steel vat, walking around and you're really angry, but you won't come outside and tell me what's going on. But we learned how to do that, and that's another topic.
So let me jump in for a moment, Jonathan, if you don't mind. Peter, you walked a long time with yourself like that.
Yep.
You created patterns. You took family history on.
Yep.
Marion, was not backwards in coming forward. She's a sort of wife that every man needs to have because it dragged you out of that place. But then dragged you into what place? Where did you go next in your relationships, and particularly your primary relationships?
I did the hard work of learning how to be a vulnerable man in a relationship with a woman. And that's not quite our topic, it's Band of Brothers. But I think the second great gift for me was beginning to unpack those vulnerabilities of early childhood, those lessons in the playground. Yeah. I think as men, we all carry underneath some of the vulnerabilities. We carry shame and wounding. And what was life-changing for me was to find the Robert Falzons of the world and others that I could begin to tell my story to, and I could begin on a regular basis to share the ups and downs of life, the conversations with Marion, not all of them, of course, but some of the important pressure points. You're off the team becomes, hey, we will walk with you through thick and thin.
Yeah.
You are never off the team because you're created in the image of God and we love you.
Yeah.
And your weaknesses don't matter. We've got them too. Together, we'll work on them and it's fine. So that transition from you're off the team to you're on the team and we won't let go
regardless
is incredible.
So why is this so rare? For people watching this who are listening to you going, okay, there's a benefit here, there's a positive, why is it not happening?
I don't think we're intentional enough, and I think over generations men have encultured their loneliness. So dads haven't connected and drawn it out of their sons. And then they've taken all those simple lessons out of the playground, being tough, being individual, not displaying emotion, intimacy is embargoed. They've taken that into all their relationships. And so unconsciously, we have a whole system and a network, a pattern of life that says men don't do that stuff. And we have to intentionally, I think, unlearn.
We've created an industry called the solo man, even a product called the solo man, and to be that solo, nobody's going to touch me, nobody's going to hurt me, nobody's going to reach me, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. That solo man mentality is sort of what you're talking about.
And it affects everything. It affects your marriage, it affects the way that you raise and nurture your kids,
and your relationship with God.
And it affects your emotional health. And in thinking about this topic, the other little light that went on for me was that really when God says you should love me with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength and your neighbour as yourself, he's not just offering us a duty, something that we have to do, but he's offering us an opportunity. So if I let you love me with heart and mind and soul, I learn to love God better, and I'm restored and healed and I become fully human. So rather than it just being a duty of the Christian life to be nice to people, Jesus is really saying, and God is really saying in Jesus, be connected.
And Peter, do you think that by being with men, companions, can I use that term, companions on the journey, that some of your wounding is healed? Some of your wounding from your past is healed, but also that you start to rewrite some new history for your own family.
Absolutely. I belong to two kind of experiences. One is every Thursday morning I meet with 8 guys and we journal together. We read the scriptures of the day, and we've done it for 12 years at a coffee shop between 7 and 8 in the morning. We share the journey of faith in the scriptures, but we also share life. So I know these guys really well. One of them went home to God last year. We buried him together. It was an extraordinary experience. I've learnt how to be a better man from these guys. My healing is, I watch them be courageous, I watch them be faithful, I watch them be, in some ways, more manly. And the example of those really excellent brothers who love me and are close to me, they're not just heroes way over there on the screen, but they're close, is bread for the day, just like the scriptures are.
So for people watching this, give us some takeaways, give us some action steps. How do they begin to move from, at the broader sense, isolation to community?
I'd say absolutely buy this proposition and go to God and pray every day for these relationships and then go after them.
So prayer?
Prayer. The second thing, this connection of man to man fixes a really serious hole in our society today. Find 1, 2, 3, 5. I've got 24 of these relationships, I counted them, and begin to build them, and you'll change the world. You'll change not only your own life, but your wife, your relationship with your wife, your kids, and those around you.
So 2, intentionally go and find some guys to spend time with and share your life with.
And then the third thing, begin patiently and carefully to risk. So one of the difficult things as we built these relationships was to face the downside of Robert and the downside of Peter, and the places that we're afraid to tell the truth.
Yeah.
The reason I'm good now at quietly and calmly walking into some of the new family conflicts with the next generation is that I've practiced it with this generation. And so I've got an interior ability that my father never gave me to father and to be present and to speak into some of the harder things.
Yeah. So the third thing is to be courageous, brave, man up, go to those places that no one's been to in your history and risk it.
Yeah.
And risk it.
Start telling the truth at a deeper level, which is what we call vulnerability.
Yeah. How good was that, Jonathan?
Mate, you know, I just want to say a huge thank you. Personally, I've learned a great deal about intentionality, about being deliberate about these things that matters, and also sharing the richness of your own journey with us. So on behalf of all of us, thanks so much for joining us on the Real Men series.
Jonathan, Peter was excellent, really excellent material. What did you take out of that?
Mate, a huge privilege to have him, I think, with us today in the studio. He's obviously, as we mentioned, becoming a real elder, somebody that we really need to be speaking into the lives of men.
Wise man.
Wise man. We need more of them. For me, a couple of big takeaways. I think he had a real focus on intentionality. I think he's very big on these things don't happen by accident. If you want to increase the depth and the richness and the effectiveness of male friendships in your life, then you're going to have to actually show up and do something specific. So the phone isn't necessarily going to ring tomorrow with 15 people saying, hey, we'd love you to come and join our group. So his thing on intentionality was excellent. So I think everybody listening to that, it's really crucial that you are intentional about this, that you actually make a clear decision to take some kind of action. You know, one of my favourite speakers used to say, never leave the scene of a decision without taking some kind of action. So intentionality, and related to that, not just in his backstory of his own life and his journey with his father, and a lot about courage, and that if you're going to be intentional and you're going to reach out to other men, then you're going to have to take the risk of being misunderstood or rejection, and that takes courage. And, you know, sometimes it's just getting over that first initial fear of what if I reach out to 2 or 3 friends and they don't want to do it. Well, this stuff's so important that you have to risk that, you know, and if you're not prepared to take that risk, then you don't get the reward. So for me, intentionality and courage. How about you? Yeah, great points, Jonathan. I just to add to that, intentionality and courage, you know, what Jesus said to his disciples more often than almost any other thing he said was, be not afraid. It's difficult, 100%. It's difficult, it's hard, but it's really worth an investment, really, to plant into your life this intentionality and courage. And the thing that I took out of it, including those 2 things, was this: unless I can become a friend to me, unless I can become a friend to this person, I don't know how I'm going to become a friend to you or anybody else. Unless I can learn and start to train myself, look in the mirror every day and start to become a friend to Robert, I can't be a friend to Jonathan or anybody else. So they're the 3 points, isn't it? Do you want to summarise those? Look, for me, intentionality, courage, and working on ourselves and doing that hard work. Yeah. So we want to thank you for joining us this week for the Real Men series. We've been really honoured to do this episode on Band of Brothers. Great having our guest Peter Shakhovskoy with us. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got some thoughts, ideas, if you'd like to know more, then please reach out to Shalom World on social media. You just simply search for Shalom World on your favourite social media channel. You'll definitely find us there. Or you can email us direct at feedback@shalomworld.org. But we hope that's been a blessing to you. Be intentional. Think about the importance of building strong male friendships. And Robert, we're really excited because next week we're going to have another fantastic guest. We're going to be addressing another really important topic. So make sure you join us for the next episode in the Real Men series. See you then.
Thank you for joining us today. We'd like to hear what you thought of today's session. Share your feedback with us at podcast@shalomworld.org. You can motivate and support us today. shalomworld.org/donate. Visit shalomworld.org for more information about Shalom World podcasts. To get the latest updates, make sure you follow us on Instagram at Shalom World Podcasts. Shalom World Podcasts is now available on all online platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others.